It's time for the Cybersecurity News Bite with Jim Guckin.
Cybersecurity News Bite episode number 43 for January 30th, 2023. Old vulnerability used to attack VMware, Nevada ransom group, data breach at Vice Media involves social security numbers and financial information, and the next Lockbit color. Welcome to the show. I am Jim Guckin. Our first story is one that we've talked to about many times, which is ESXi servers, VMware servers in particular. There was a French cloud provider named OVH Cloud who published a report linking a massive wave of attacks against their hosted VMware ESXi servers. The first day of the attack, they said there was about 120 servers using VMware that were encrypted. And then over the weekend, there were reports about 2,400. So obviously this thing is spreading massively. Now, VMware has confirmed that there are attacks on this and that it is not a 0 day. In fact, it is already patched. It's been patched for almost a year. So these servers do not have all their latest patches. But you know, VMware does their best and says, look, we advise all the admins to sit there and update their servers like they should have done for a while. And if for some reason you can't do the update, then you need to go and disable the OpenSLP service, which is the thing that's being attacked. But all updates since 2021 have disabled that by default. So if you have something, over a year, that you haven't patched, this is where we're at right now. So this attack is CVE 2021-21974. It's an 8.8 out of 10. It's considered a very high vulnerability. And this is caused by a heap overflow issue in the OpenSLP service. It can be exploited by unauthenticated actors, which is why this is something that is being exploited now and should be patched. And from the way it's described, this is a low complexity attack, meaning you don't have to be super technical to get it running. Those two things, if you have a VMware ESXi server that is accessible by the internet, which one it shouldn't be, but if it is, that should kind of give you chills down your spine, because that's, unauthenticated, low bar to get into it. So just so you know, if you have the impacted version of EXI, you want to look for versions 7 point anything prior to ESXi 70U1C-1732551. I'm going to name these, but you can totally check out our show notes at cybersecuritynewsbite.com to see them. ESXi versions 6.7 and prior, and ESXi version 6.5 and prior. There's a serial number. I'm not going to read those again. They were patched back in February of last year. February 23rd, 2021 is when the patch came out. So we are talking almost a year that this patch has been available. The attacks right now are focusing, from what we can find, on ESXi hyper versions, hypervisor in version 6 point something to 6.7. So in the 6 point range there. The ransomware is being tracked by a service called Ransomware, as in WHERE. They're reporting so far that only 4 ransoms have been paid to the address that's listed. That totals about $88,000. And if you get hit by this, the reason why that is so low is VMware itself has a VMware ESXi recovery guide written by a security researcher, Enes Sonmez, Enesonmez. Apologize if I butchered it. Which gives you kind of step-by-step guides on how to rebuild the machines and recover the data for free. So obviously it doesn't make sense paying that. So if you have servers that may be vulnerable to this, remember, update. Always update. I don't know why you would let it go that far. If you can't, for whatever reason, disable the vulnerable service location protocol, that SLP service, and monitor any traffic that might be going to the Open SLP port, which is port 427, and make sure you're protected. Otherwise, you're going to have to, at minimum, rebuild your environment, or you're going to pay the ransom. And neither of those which are optimal. So please make sure you're checking out that information. Once again, all this is located as well as the news sources we use to bring this at cybersecurity.newsbite.com. Now, you know me, I like to keep my eye on the upcoming ransomware groups that you need to pay attention to. And one of the new ones is called Nevada, as I assume in the state. And the reason I'm saying watch out for them, because they are a ransomware as a service group. But they have very appealing partner conditions if you would look at them in a business sense. So their initial commission rate is 85%. So that's pretty good. You want to do the work, get into the system, and load their software. The actors behind the ransomware group have the ability to escalate their attacks beyond just the initial penetration of the system. They like to perform post-exploitation activities for maximum damage. So not only do they get in, but they kind of really lock themselves into a network. The Nevada group also has Windows and Linux, as well as ESXi versions of their ransomware, which strangely enough is being updated rather frequently. So, I mean, it's not like this is, one of those pieces of hardware you can kind of see. Like, they're constantly coming out with new versions and new tools for it. They not only developed their ransomware, but developed unauthorized access for additional exploits. So they get in, they pretty much make sure that they maintain access, and then they kind of do some other things to maximize their damage. Developers behind the project improve the functionality of the ransomware. Just like I said, they have new versions for their affiliates supporting both Windows, Linux, and ESXi. And they're kind of popping them out on a fairly regular basis. So, yeah, it's never good. And from what we can tell, it looks like the Nevada team specializes in what happens after the initial exploit is run. So, it's the door. Once the door's open, that's really where they shine. They may not be the best in exploitation of networks, and getting access to more credentials and stuff like that in networks. Now, I will say, from what I've seen of this group, it's kind of interesting because the ransomware encrypts, well, the Windows version of the ransomware encrypts stuff in stripes, which is just a huge advantage in speed when encrypting a system. So it's pretty interesting that they're kind of like, that's their pitch. Like, look, we get in ransomware, you kind of really get a good advantage of that. The malware is written in Rust, and the locker can be executed through a console with some predefined flags, meaning you don't have to be really technical on the back end to get it up and running. So some of the flags that are pre-programmed into it, meaning you just run the command with the flag, include encrypting selected files and directories, meaning you're very targeted in your attack. Self-deleting the program if you make sure that you're not being detected, or if you want to kind of, the new tactic being to wear down your SOC team as they keep responding to alerts but they don't find anything. It deletes shadow copies pretty easily. It loads hidden drives, making it harder for it to detect where it's going. It has a self-mode encryption, and what most malware is going to do today, which is finding and encrypting network shares. And that's mostly just for maximum damage. And this usually because a lot of IT people are like, yeah, don't save anything on your computer if it crashes, blah blah blah. Save it to our H or G or S, whatever drive you want to save for company files that are shared amongst multiple departments. That's really the goal here is to have that machine reach out via the share and start locking down large amounts of data that a lot of people have access to. And that's just trying to force your hand into, recovering it or paying for the ransom. So it's very, very tricky, something you have to watch out for because it could get you. So Nevada just is a newer group. It's coming up, but they already are putting themselves on a business stance by giving a bigger commission rate. And if you use them, that initial rate can go up. So, that's not bad. You target, you do what you need to do. You run their software. They get a little chunk, but you get most of it. And the percentage, from what I can tell from Nevada, the 85% initial is a lot better than a lot of other ones are going to give you when you come in. So that's a good deal, and that means a lot of malicious actors are going to sit there and take advantage of that. So keep an eye out on the normal stuff to make sure you're protected against it. Now, if you've heard of Vice Media or the Vice Media Group, well, they've had a little bit of a data breach that was somewhat significant. This was all found out in filings on January 26th, where the Vice Media Group has admitted they were the victims of a cyber attack on their network. They were alerted in March of 2022. They hired a cybersecurity firm to come in and pretty much investigate the incident. And this breach caused, which should be no surprise to anyone on the show, came in via an email account that was compromised. And the email account that was compromised was a sensitive one because it had social security numbers and financial information that was end up being part of the breach. This impacted about 1,724 of their employees. And the reason, it happened back in March and we're kind of just hearing about it now is mostly due from what Vice is saying, due to trying to find the people whose personal information was involved. They didn't want to kind of come out and say it until they, I guess, had first reached out to all the people who were impacted by this. And figuring, I guess, the length of what the attack was, or maybe, I guess, by the time they got the reports, there were some people who were just no longer there, so they had to kind of go and find the updated information for the people to kind of do it. Now, I'm kind of surprised why this entire process took a year, according to them, before they kind of released it, saying, hey, it took us all this time. And, the victims are getting the pretty standard package for, hey, oops, we lost your data kind of stuff, which is 12 months of credit and identity monitoring services through Equifax, which gives about a $1 million identity theft insurance thing. So if anything does happen with this data, then, and you can, I guess, trace it back to this breach, well, then you're covered. I guess part of the information comes at this point is, what took so long? Why is there not a lot of information on this? And why, from what I found out, this being just an internal Vice email account, why did it have all this sensitive information in there for that many people? Are they not purging their email after a certain period of time? And I will say, if you're not currently purging email, it's something to consider. I know there's a lot of retention rules that need to be put in place, but I don't necessarily find retaining email inside of a user's mailbox is the best thing. I mean, I'd rather have an external service that does this, but start clearing the stuff that's not covered under that, because this is information that could be used in an attack against you, or if the account is compromised, all that information is there. I have been very big previously, holding your email for everything. You never know when you're going to need it. I have gotten over that because I've seen so many of these breaches now that the information could have been in there for a while, and once the attacker has access to it, they know everything that was in that box, and it can be used to leverage attacks or pretend to be the person. Like, hey, we talked back in October about this, and you did talk. Well, as far as I know, that user did talk to them. So I've gotten more recently to the habit of not saving information forever. But if you're one of the people who were infected by Vice Media's breach, hopefully, nothing bad comes of the data, but it's just one of those things where it just took so long for the announcement. And if I believe them in their, hey, we didn't want to announce until we talked to everyone who was involved, why did it take so long? Were you trying to kind of hold it out? I said, we're talking about March 2022. And that's 10 months to finally get, where we're at now, almost a year before you're able to make a public statement on this. Kind of makes me wonder what was going on behind the scenes, and if it was kind of one of those things of, well, we release it later and hopefully no one will make a big deal out of it. But, to find up-to-date information for people makes me wonder how many people were impacted that are not there anymore. Is this a high turnover? Could that be part of the cause of why your security program didn't detect unusual access to that account? And they meant, Grant said, they're never going to let you know when an incident won't happen. It just, as a curiosity for me, how did they get in? How did they move on? How did they, pivot this attack to something else? Was all the information just sitting in the email account? Or did it have access to other things? Like, those are the things that really make me wonder, and you should be thinking of for your own environment. Now, for our final story this week, I want to talk about Lockbit, the ransomware. And the reason I want to talk about it is they've come out with a new version of their ransomware software. And much like everything, they've given it a new color. So if you've probably heard of Lockbit, and usually when you hear about Lockbit in the news is a color behind it. There's kind of three main versions. Right now there's Lockbit Red, Lockbit Black, which is also known as Lockbit 3. Which, the reason it's called Black is because it kind of uses the Black Matter source code. Well, they have a new one. And Lockbit, as I said, have been a big threat in the upcoming time. You've probably heard a lot about them in the news. In fact, they were one of the most active groups out there in 2022 with more victims than any other group. So if you're familiar, you've probably heard Red or Black or Lockbit 3, or I believe there's even a Lockbit ESXi. But they just launched a new one called Lockbit Green. So that's the new color. Red, black, green. Now, the interesting thing about green is, well, Conti ransomware. It was one of those big things, last year we talked about a lot. It was a very popular ransomware tool. Well, Lockbit Green significantly overlaps with the old Conti ransomware. In fact, about 89% of the code is almost a direct copy of Conti ransomware version 3. And they've kind of also updated their ESXi model to kind of be somewhat similar. Now, the reason that this is kind of something that you should concern yourself with is hackers that may have used Conti in the past are going to start preferring one they're familiar with. They know the tools, they know how it's used. And the fact that it's so familiar so similar to the Conti ransomware means there's less of a learning curve. They're just going to be able to pick this up and run with it. Now, I should say why the majority of it is the same. There are a couple changes to it. The ransomware file name note, where they tell you, their manifesto and why they did it. They changed to exclamation point dash restore dash my dash files dash exclamation point dot text. And the other thing which I find hard to detect from a certain standpoint is, rather than using the standard .lockbit extension when they encrypt your files, it uses random extensions, making it a lot harder for you just to put monitoring tools to say, hey, if you see .lockbit, notify staff immediately. But as I said, the biggest thing that scares me is this is and we talked about this, that when Conti was kind of shut down and the source code was leaked, that they're going to use it and they're going to be able to bring those tools into other tools. And here's what you see here, which is, Lockbit, who is already a very prolific ransomware gang out there, now has tools that they don't have to put a lot of thought into to be able to make it up and running. So it's something you need to watch out for. But as I said, the random extensions are going to make it very hard for you to really pinpoint that information the way you need to. You can try to look for that restore file. That's probably the best way of targeting it down, but it's going to take some time to really narrow it down. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Don't forget you can find out more information as well as the show notes and all the information we've given here at cybersecurity.newsbite.com. You can find more information about me, Jim Guckin, at jimguckin.com. Very clever. And please make sure you stay safe online, and we'll talk next week.
You've been listening to the Cybersecurity News Bite with Jim Guckin. Learn more about our show at cybersecurity.newsbite.com.